Starting in .NET 4.0, Microsoft introduced an ability for some collections to test for what is known as structural equality. What this essentially means is whether a collection contains exactly the same elements in the same order as another collection. In this code, I've declared two arrays of strings, and you can see that these arrays actually contain the same values at the same indices. That means they are structurally equal. If I want to test for that, I can't simply use equality on arrays. This code tests for array equality using both the equals method and the equality operator, but if I run that, it displays false and false. That's because arrays are reference types, and in common with other collections, they do not implement equality. So both the operator and the equals method will evaluate reference equality, the default behavior for any reference type that doesn't implement equality. And these arrays may be structurally equal, but they are different instances, so normal equality will therefore say that they are not equal. If I want to test whether these arrays are structurally equal, then this is the code I need to use. What I've done is first cast the array to an interface called IStructuralEquatable. IStructuralEquatable is the interface that allows testing for structural equality. And then I test for equality by using an equals method on this interface. Then I call console.writeLine. By the way, I've put the console.writeLine in a separate statement this time, just because the equality expression is longer than most of the ones we've seen on the course up to now. So having it on a separate line makes the code clearer, I think. Anyway, let's run that. We can see that has displayed true, showing that these arrays are structurally equal. So what are we doing here? Firstly, notice this explicit cast to IStructuralEquatable. IStructuralEquatable's equals method is implemented explicitly for arrays, so you have to cast to the interface to be able to call it. Presumably that's to avoid any confusion with calling arrays' normal equals method, which of course will do reference equality. IStructuralEquatable's equals method requires two parameters, the array I'm comparing this array with, and an equality comparer. The equality comparer is what will be used to test whether each element of the first array equals the corresponding element of the second array. And I've chosen to use a simple ordinal comparison to compare strings here. I'll regard strings as equal only if they contain exactly the same character sequences. Let's now change the P in pineapple in the second array to a capital P. Now, using the ordinal string comparison, the third element of the two arrays will be considered different. So if I run that again, we should get the answer false. Let's check. That works nicely as well. And one final thing, I will now change the string comparer to one that ignores the case. With this comparer, the two arrays should once again evaluate as containing exactly the same elements, and so as structurally equal. And if we run that, that is indeed what's happened. So that's structural equality. There are a couple of observations we need to make about this. Firstly, while this looks quite useful, there aren't actually that many collections that will allow this. To my knowledge, the only ones that do offer structural equality are arrays and, if you count them as collections, tuples. You'll also notice that IStructuralEquatable is not a generic interface. And to match this, it's in the system.collections namespace. So if you want to use it, you may need to add a reference to this namespace in your code, as you can see we have done in this code. And finally, if you use IStructuralEquatable, don't forget that equality comparer second parameter. If I type in array_ec and a dot and look at IntelliSense, you can see an equals overload that only requires one parameter, and it's tempting to think that means the equality comparer is optional. It's not. That one parameter equals is nothing to do with IStructuralEquatable. It's the objects.equals method which of course is available on every type, and which will do reference equality on the arrays, which is not what we want here. If you want to do structural equality, you have to pass an equality comparer. Obviously, it's fine to choose the default comparer for a type, but it has to be there.